everyone, and welcome to the Jayda in Stitches show. Halloween is coming, and if you haven't yet decided what you're dressing up as, then we have a special pattern this week that will help you along on your costuming endeavor. This fairy tale cloak can be made short, like a capelet, medium length, or even very long. It has a very deep hood, which you can quite literally hide in, and it's beautiful. You can make it in any color, any combination of colors, and you can make it in acrylic or wool or cotton, whatever you might have lying around. Now, a cloak or a capelet is a beautiful and elegant addition to a regular wardrobe. I have several of them. I wear them frequently. They're a lovely little thing to throw around your shoulders if the office is chilly, and you look really classy if you're out for a stroll. But most people associate cloaks and capes with costuming. They are a ubiquitous part of a medieval costume. We associate them with several mythical people and creatures, for example, a wood elf. Cloaks are a slightly more challenging pattern than a shawl or a poncho, and because of that, I have a really neat stitch marker technique I'm going to teach you guys today that will help you with increasing rows and repeating pattern rows. This beautiful cloak pattern will also exist as a written pattern in our Etsy shop. We will have a link to our Etsy shop in the description box down below, and if you pop over and purchase a pattern, you are helping support us here at the Jayda in Stitches show, and we really appreciate it. That said, let us grab our hooks, grab our yarn, summon our staffs, and we will head on over to the craft table and stitch ourselves up a fairy tale cloak.
To make our cloak, you're going to want to set aside between 600 and 900 grams of a size 4 medium weight yarn. I have 800 grams here in various shades of the same green. You will need different amounts of yarn depending on how short or long you want to make your cloak. I am making mine on the longer side. You're going to want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. I'm using a 6mm hook today, but you can also use 6.5mm if you want it a little bit on the looser side, your stitches, or 5.5mm if you want slightly tighter stitches. This is a J hook, if you don't know what a 6mm is. You're also going to want about 6 safety pins or stitch markers. This is to help keep us on track as we increase. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. We're going to begin with the hood. We're going to make 2 identical pieces. So I've made the first side so you can get a look at it. This is how it's going to look when you've finished one of them. And both are going to look the same. You may notice that they lean a little to one side or the other. That's okay. It's not going to be noticeable when we get the whole thing together. Grab your yarn. We're going to begin with a slip knot. And we're going to start by chaining 40. Once you have 40 chains, make sure you count them twice to double check. We're going to do the first row, very basic. We're going to single crochet. Skip the first chain from the hook, find the second chain, single crochet into it, and single crochet into every single chain all the way back to the beginning. You'll have 39 chains, I should say, 39 single crochet stitches at the end of row 1. At the end of row 1, you should have 39 single crochets. We're going to begin row 2 now. We're going to chain 3, turn our work, and we're going to double crochet into the very same stitch that the chain 3 come out of. So that's it right there. Skip the next stitch, 2 double crochet into the next stitch. Skip the next stitch, 2 double crochet into the next stitch. And that is the pattern. Skip a stitch, work 2 double crochet into the next stitch. Skip a stitch, work 2 double crochet into the next stitch. Work that all the way across and you will finish the row by working 2 double crochet into the very last stitch. And that is row 2, And that is every even row for the rest of this part of the cape. So both hood pieces, every even row, you begin with a chain 3, double crochet in the same stitch as the chain 3, skip a stitch, and then work 2 double crochet into the next stitch. Skip a stitch, work 2 double crochet into the next stitch. Repeat all the way to the end, and you should finish with 2 double crochet in the last stitch. That will incidentally give you 40 double crochets. That includes your chain 3. So every even row will have 40 double crochets in it. And every odd row from here on out, we chain 1, turn our work. We're going to skip the first stitch. So always skip that first stitch on an odd row when you're single crocheting. Skip over it to the next stitch, single crochet into that one, single crochet into every stitch across, including the top of the chain 3 at the end, and you'll be back down to 39 single crochet stitches. At the end of row 3, make sure you put your last single crochet in the top of the chain 3 from the previous row, and that goes for every odd row from here on out for the hood pattern section. Every even row begins with 3 chains, flip your work, double crochet into the same stitch that those chains come out of, and then skip a stitch and work 2 double crochets into the next stitch. That's the row, the even row, the row 2 row. You're going to repeat that for every even row. Every odd row begins with a chain 1 and you skip that first stitch and then single crochet into the next stitch and in each stitch across. So every even row will have 40 double crochets in it. Every odd row will have 39 single crochets in it. And you're going to repeat rows 2 and 3, 2 and 3, 2 and 3 for a total of 25 rows. So at the end of row 25 will be a single crochet row. I will see you at the end of row 25. So repeat rows 2 and 3, 2 and 3, and I'll see you at the end of row 25. Once you've completed 25 rows, it's time to fasten off. Leave yourself a little bit of tail, snip your yarn, and then grab your yarn needle, and you want to flip your work over. So this is the right side of your fabric. So we're looking at, you'd be just finishing your last row, which is single crochet, and you can see the nice neat little V's of your single crochets and the back sides of your double crochets. So that's the front or the right side of your fabric. This is the wrong side of your fabric, and this is the back side. You're going to weave your tails in on the wrong side or the back side of your fabric. So just thread up those tails. You're going to have one on either end and weave them in. Once you've got both sides made and all your ends woven in, you're going to place both sides right sides together, so the wrong or the back sides of each of your pieces will be facing outward. And they're not going to completely line up on the edges because there's a bit of a slant to them. They're going to sit, one will sit out one way, one will sit out the other. Doesn't matter. You want to take a long piece of yarn and thread it up in your yarn needle, and we're going to sew our ends, our two sides I should say, together. So you're going to take your needle, pass it through the top of each of the 2 single crochets on the ends of those pieces, and we're going to knot our yarn on. You can weave this little tail in later. I'm just going to knot it in there. Tie it at least twice. If you're using slippery yarn, make sure you tie it at least 3 times because you don't want that knot to undo. Then you're going to work through every single set of stitches, and there should be an even number all the way across. You should have 39 sets of single crochet stitches to work across, and you're just going to pick them all up one at a time and sew your way across the top edge of your hood. Once you've finished sewing together the top seam of those 2 pieces, you're going to pair up the other 2 raw edges. So it's a little easier to pair these up. It's still not going to completely match up, but that's okay. But the 2 edges, of course, should be the same height, so you should be able to match them up stitch edge per stitch edge. And these aren't, because they're raw edges, you don't really have an obvious place to run your needle through. So you're just going to pair up each set of stitches, and it's pretty easy to see because the long ones are double crochets and there's little single crochet rows in between, remember. So you should be able to put in at least a couple of stitches in each set of double crochets, and then a set of, or I should say a stitch in the ends of each single crochet row, or the odd rows. So go ahead, take your time, pick up edges of those stitches, remember to get both of them, and just work your way down the side of your hood. You want, you can err on the side of more stitches than necessary because that'll just make the seam stronger. Just trying to make sure that you keep stopping every once in a while and ensuring that you haven't put your edge out of alignment. So you want to make sure that you are still nice and even. And I'll see you down at the bottom. Your last stitch should be through the pair of chains at the very bottom of that row. So that'll be the very bottom of each piece. And I like to sew through that twice before I knot off. So I have my last stitch worked through there, and then I can create a little knot using that little stitch I just made. And I'm going to do that a couple times just to make sure that it is good and in there and not going anywhere. Great. Then you can weave in your little tails across the inside of, remember we're looking at the wrong side because the wrong sides are facing outwards. You can just weave your, whatever's left of your yarn. If you've got a lot like me, then just weave it back and forth a couple times to make sure it's not going to go anywhere. And then trim the excess. Now you can take your hood and flip it right side out. And that is your top seam. That'll be the top of your hood. And that is your back seam. That's the back of your hood. And that is your hood all finished. Don't worry if your edges don't line up yet, because they will when we are completely finished. So now that that's done, let's move on to the rest of our little capelet. On to the rest of our cape now. We're going to begin at the neck. We're going to start with a slip knot. And we're going to chain 80. Once you're sure that you've got 80 chains, you're going to half double crochet into the second chain from the hook, chain 1, skip a chain, and half double crochet into each of the next 5. Once you've half double crocheted into the next 5, you're going to chain 1, skip a chain, and half double crochet into the next 5 chains. You're going to repeat this all the way to the end. So half double crochet into the next 5, chain 1, skip a chain, half double crochet into the next 5. Repeat that all the way across, and I'll see you at the end. Once you get to the last 6 chains remaining in your foundation chain row, you're going to finish your last 5 half double crochet, chain 1, skip a chain, half double crochet into the next 3 chains, chain 1, skip the second last chain, and half double crochet into the last chain. Now, including your chains and all of your half double crochets, you should have 79 stitches at the end of row 1. And this is our neck edging. It also is what we're going to pass our little drawstring through to allow us to cinch our cape up around our neck and keep ourselves warm. So now we're going to get into a very familiar looking pattern. You're going to chain 1, turn your work, and you're going to single crochet into the top of every single stitch. So that includes the very first one, which is the top of a half double crochet. And you're going to single crochet into every space as well. So single crochet into every stitch and every space across, and you should have 79 stitches when you are finished this row. At the end of row 2, you should still have 79 stitches. They're all single crochets. And if you found it difficult to differentiate between the tops of your stitches and your spaces, then you can just single crochet into every single stitch as opposed to just doing the stitches and the spaces. So that means you'll be single crocheting into your chains as well. And that will make everything easy to count, and it'll also make your spaces nice and even looking. All right, on to row 3. We are going to chain 3 to begin, turn our work, and you're going to double crochet into the same stitch that those chain 3 came out of. This is also a familiar looking bit of the pattern. You're going to skip a stitch, 2 double crochet into the next stitch, skip a stitch, 2 double crochet into the next stitch, and repeat all the way across. I'll see you at the end. At the end of row 3, you should have 80 double crochets, and that double crochet pattern is now moved to be the odd row. So for the rest of the cloak, the odd rows will be this double crochet. However, the pattern won't change. It'll still be 2 double crochet, skip 1, 2 double crochet, skip 1, skip 1, but the stitch count might vary as we increase. Speaking of increase, let's work an increase row now. We're going to chain 1, turn. This is a single crochet row, but it is an increase row. All increase rows will be single crochet rows, and the single crochet rows are now the even rows. We always skip that first stitch in this single crochet row. You're going to find the next stitch or the second stitch. You're going to work 2 single crochets into it, and then you're going to single crochet into each of the next 10. Once you've worked 10 single crochets, you're going to find the next stitch and work 2 single crochet into it. You're going to pause, grab one of your stitch markers or your safety pins, and you're going to slip it across the first of those 2 single crochets. Then you're going to single crochet into each of the next 10. At the end of that, you're going to work 2 single crochets into the next stitch and mark the first of those 2 with a stitch marker. You're going to do that 6 times in total so that you use up all 6 of your safety pins or stitch markers, and I'll catch up with you there and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, after you've used up all 6 of your stitch markers, it should look something like this. You've got 2 single crochet into the same stitch, the first one is marked, and then 10 single crochet. 2 single crochet into the same stitch, 1 is marked, and then 10 single crochet. 2, 1 is marked, and then 10. 2, 1 is marked, and then 10. So on and so on. You should have 6 of your stitch markers used up, and you'll have 12 stitches left in row 4. You're going to single crochet into every stitch all the way up to the end, which will be the top of your chain 3, and you will work 2 single crochet into the top of your chain 3. After you've worked your last 2 single crochet into the top of the chain 3, give it a count. You should have 87 single crochets all the way across. You're going to leave your stitch markers where they are, and now we're back to an odd row, which is the double crochet row. We're going to chain 3, turn our work, double crochet into the same stitch as the chain 3, skip a stitch, work 2 double crochet, and so on. And I'll see you at the end of row 5. At the end of row 5, you should have 88 double crochets. We're going to do another odd, or I should say an even row of increases now. So this is going to be a single crochet row. So you chain 1 and turn. But before we start to single crochet, you have 2 options. If you can work along and see where your safety pins or your stitch markers are and move them up as you work, you can do that. Or before you start this row, you can go through your entire row, find your stitch markers, you take them off the stitch that they're sitting on and move up to the stitch directly on top of it. So it doesn't have to be exact. If you're 1 over or 1 under, it doesn't matter, but move it up to the stitch above. Find the next one, take it out, move it up to the stitch above. You're just marking the stitch. It doesn't have to be, you want the stitch part that you're going to use available, so you just move them up. And when you get to this part, so remember, on an increase row, and I'll just start it here with you, you're going to skip over that first stitch, you don't touch it. You work 2 single crochet for an increase row in that next stitch. And then you're just going to single crochet along until you get to this marked stitch. And on this marked stitch, you're going to work 2 single crochet. Then you're just going to single crochet normally until you get to the next marked stitch, and then you're going to work 2 single crochet in there, and so on and so on and so on, till you get to the very end, which is your chain 3 from the previous row, and you work your final 2 single crochet increase into that stitch. So you're basically increasing 8 stitches in total across row 6. And I'll see you at the end. At the end of row 6, your little increase row, you should have 95 stitches, and I've taken the opportunity to move to mark the new first of 2 increases with my stitch marker. So every time you do an increase row, you want to mark that first of 2 stitches in the little increases. You should always have 6 of your little stitch markers going, and you can move them up at the end of every double crochet row so that you can see where you need to work your next increases. Because rows 7 through 14, you're going to repeat this row of double crochet and then an increase single crochet row. Row of double crochet, increase single crochet row. Remember, your double crochet rows are always 2 double crochet, skip 1, 2 double crochet. Your double crochet rows will always be 1 stitch more than your row when you do a single crochet row when you finish it. But by the end of row 14, which will be an increased single crochet row, you will have 127 stitches at the end of row 14. So just remember that every odd row is a double crochet row. You start with a chain 3 and you double crochet into that same stitch. Skip a stitch and work 2 double crochets. It's really simple. There's no increasing going on in the double crochet rows. But your even rows will be single crochet increase rows. You just want to move up your stitch markers, and wherever your stitch marker is, you put in an increase, which is 2 single crochet in the same stitch. And remember, every single crochet row begins with a chain 1, and you skip over that first stitch. You don't want to touch it because that is what's keeping our stitch pattern even in the long run. So I'll let you go. I'll see you at the end of row 14. Once you've reached the end of row 14, which should be a single crochet increase row, you should have 127 stitches and something that looks like this. Now I'm a medium-sized adult female, and this wraps neatly around my shoulders, not tight up against my throat, but if you want your capelet to be larger, you can continue in this pattern of a row of double crochet and then an increase single crochet row, back and forth until the top of your capelet is as large as you like it to be. Once you have a capelet top, which is this, as large as you like, we can continue from there. At that point, you can remove all of your safety pins and stitch markers because we won't be increasing anymore. Row 15, or the next row after you have finished your last increase row, is going to be a double crochet row. Every single double crochet row is exactly the same. You begin with chain 3, double crochet in the same stitch as the chain 3, skip a stitch, and work 2 double crochet into the next stitch. So every double crochet row will be absolutely the same. Row 15 marks the first of our new 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern row repeater. This little repeater of 4 rows will take us to the end of our cape. It's not that complicated. In fact, the first row, which is row 15, and row 17, or the second row of the 1, 2, 3, 4 repeater, are always going to be double crochet rows. Nothing changes about that. And at the end of this row, you should have 128 stitches, or 1 stitch more than the final count of your last increase row. The second and fourth rows of this little 1, 2, 3, 4 repeater are single crochet rows, and they only differ in one little way. The first of those 2 rows, instead of skipping the first stitch after you chain 1 and turn, and work a single crochet into that first stitch. Single crochet all the way across as normal, but when you get to the end, you do not single crochet in the top of the chain 3, ignore it completely. I'll see you at the end of this row, and I'll show you what it looks like. At the end of row 16, you should be back down to 127 stitches, or the original stitch count you had when you finished your increasing. I did not single crochet in the top of the chain 3, I only single crocheted in top of the last real double crochet. So that is the row 16, or the first of 2 single crochet rows for the rest of your repeater. Row 17, chain 3, turn your work, and work a regular old double crochet row of 2 double crochets, skip 1, 2 double crochets, and so on. And that will be row 17, and I'll see you for row 18. At the end of row 17, you should be back up to 128 stitches, or one more stitch than your stitch count after your last row of increase. And for row 18, the last row in our little 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern repeater, we're going to do a single crochet row, obviously, but we're going to do what we were before. We're going to chain 1, turn, skip the first stitch, single crochet into the next stitch, and every stitch across. Remember, we're not increasing. None of these rows are increasers now. We're just maintaining a little alternating stitch count. And when you get to the end of this last row, you're going to work a single crochet in the top of the chain 3. So every row 16 and row 18, or the rows 2 and 4 of this little repeater, you're going to single crochet in every stitch across and skip the chain 3, and then in the second one you're going to skip the first single crochet, or skip the first stitch and single crochet in every stitch across, including the top of the chain 3 at the end. So you're going to alternate back and forth, and that's just going to keep the edge of our cape a little more even. If you get going along at a real good pace and it helps to have a visual, I put a stitch marker in my row 16, or the second row of my little repeater. So this is the single crochet row where I single crochet in every single stitch, including the first one across, but skip the chain 3 at the end. So that I know when I've done a couple more rows that I have to, this is the reminder that I need to revert back and basically alternate between the 2 rows. So if it helps to have a little visual, then you can do that. And obviously every time you complete a row 2 of the 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern, then move your stitch marker to the end of that new row 2. All right, and you can repeat those 4 rows 15, 16, 17, and 18, over and over and over again until your cape is as long as you want it to be. And then I'll hook up with you then. Once your cloak is as long as you like, and I did a total of 49 rows in my cloak, you want to make sure you end on a single crochet row, because we are going to continue the single crochet around the raw edge. However, before we do that, we want to add our hood. So grab your hood and we'll do that. Take your cloak, make sure you're looking at the collar edge and you want the right side facing out. Take your hood, make sure that it is also right side out, and you want to take the 2 bottom edge corners, so that's the 2 corners, and you want to take the right side of your hood, pair one corner up with the corner of your collar, and you are going to attach your yarn through this set of chains on both sides, and sew through each set of chains all the way across, and it should work out perfectly. Now if you are more comfortable pinning your pieces into place before you sew, go ahead and do that, and that might make it easier for you. But before we go any further, we want to make sure that we sew these 2 things together. Once you've finished sewing on your hood, you will not have any corners where your hood meets your cloak. Make sure you take a second to weave in all of your short tails, and now we can go back to single crocheting our little border all the way around our cloak. You have 2 corners. There are 2 bottom corners in your cloak, and those are the only corners you have to worry about. When you get to a corner, work your last single crochet in the edge of it, and in this case we finished our last row with a single crochet row. Chain 2, single crochet into the same stitch, so that's how we create a little corner, and then working all around this raw edge, because the edges are a single crochet row, a double crochet row, a single crochet row, a double crochet row, you can pretty much plan on working 2 single crochets into the edge of your double crochets or your chain 3s, and a single crochet into the edge of your single crochet rows. So basically it's 2 single crochets for a double crochet row, 1 single crochet for a single crochet row. But it's not exacting. Take your time and back away from it every once in a while to make sure that you're not putting in too many or too few single crochets. You don't want your edge to buckle or to fan out. You want it to be nice and even. Take your time. You're going to work this single crochet edge all the way up the inside of your cloak, around your hood, and back down to the other side. And I'll hook up with you there. Once you've single crocheted all the way around your edge, you're going to get back down to the other corner. We have two corners to think about. So this corner, because it started with a single crochet, you're going to put your last single crochet in, chain 2, and then join with a slip stitch to that first single crochet of your bottom row. Now we're going to spin our entire project around so that we're looking back at the direction we just came in. We're going to slip stitch into that little corner space that we made with the 2 chains. So slip stitch right into the corner. And now you're going to chain 3, double crochet into that corner space. You're going to skip a stitch, find the next stitch, and work 2 double crochet into it. Skip a stitch, find the next stitch, work 2 double crochet into it. You're going to work your 2 double crochet row all the way back around that raw edge, which is now finished with a row of single crochet, and I'll see you back at the other corner. Once you're all the way back around to the other corner, you want to work your last 2 double crochets into that chain 2 corner space. And if it doesn't completely work out where you're skipping 1 stitch and landing in it, then you can skip 2 stitches and land in it. It won't show, don't worry about it. Chain 1, turn everything around, and we're going to single crochet back into every single stitch all the way around this border. And that will be it for the edge of our cape. The last single crochet you're going to work is into the top of the chain 3 from the previous row. And that is it. You can snip your yarn, fasten off, and then we're going to chain ourselves a drawstring. Don't forget to weave in your ends. You can either chain yourself a length like I did. I did about 176 chains, but you can chain a length as long as you like, or you can use some ribbon or cording or whatever you want to create your tie with. But once you have your tie, you're going to find the middle drawstring row that we created. You're going to skip over your border, and you're going to, this is the right side, so this is the side this is going to face outwards. You're going to take your tie, push it in through the first hole, and then out through the next hole, and then in and out all the way around, and it should work out to coming out in the last hole. And there you go. There's your hooded cape with a drawstring, all ready for a romp through the woods. I highly recommend blocking it and letting it dry overnight before you wear it the first time, just to make sure that it hangs really nicely.
I highly recommend you block your cloak. You can steam block it or wet block it, either method works, but it will fit you better and it will hang and drape very nicely. I chose to wash and block this cloak, and if you're not familiar with blocking on either method, we have links to tutorials for both. We'll put the links in the description box down below. If you make a cloak, and if you dress up, I would love to see a picture of your costume. You can share pictures with us on Instagram, Google+, or even Pinterest. I'm at Jayda in Stitches in all 3 locations. Just be sure to tag me so I can see the pictures. And that is it for this week, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and having fun with us. And we will see you here soon on the Jayda in Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an adventurous week. Bye, everyone.